So hello there. Tonight for my spooky read, I am bringing you The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, which was originally published in the 1800s, but which I read way more recently than that. I wasn't doing much reading yet in the 1800s. Yeah, I'm maybe not quite that old yet. But I have loved Gothic stories for a very long time. Like, I can't actually remember when I didn't love them, so at least from my late childhood. And for me, it probably started with movies. There are a couple that I'm a fan of old movies, like movies from the 40s, some from the 30s, but the 40s is kind of my sweet spot. Maybe going into the 50s. And I used to watch them with my mother growing up. And so we watched things like The Uninvited, which might be my favorite. And Rebecca is another favorite. And those had a lot of influence on young me, I think. And on the cheesier end of things, I also liked Dark Shadows. For a little while, it was playing during my school lunch, and I went to school in such a small place we didn't have a cafeteria, so I could come home and watch Dark Shadows with my mom and then run back to school, which was pretty cool. But the Castle of Otranto is classic, one of the early works of what's come to be known as the Gothic Romance. And there's such high drama and such cool tropes in these. So I'm going to start you just at the beginning because we just jumped straight into all the tropes on this one. Chapter 1. Manfred, Prince of Otranto, had one son and one daughter. The latter, a most beautiful virgin, aged 18, was called Matilda. Conrad, the son, was 3 years younger, a homely youth, sickly, and of no promising disposition. Yet he was the darling of his father, who never showed any symptoms of affection to Matilda. Manfred had contracted a marriage for his son with the Marquis of Vicenza's daughter Isabella, and she had already been delivered by her guardians into the hands of Manfred that he might celebrate the wedding as soon as Conrad's infirm state of health would permit. Manfred's impatience for this ceremony was remarked by his family and neighbors. The former, indeed, apprehending the severity of their prince's disposition, did not dare to utter their surmises on this precipitation. Hippolyta, his wife, an amiable lady, did sometimes venture to represent the danger of marrying their only son so early, considering his great youth and greater infirmities, but she never received any other answer than reflections on her own sterility, who had given him but one heir. His tenants and subjects were less cautious in their discourses. They attributed this hasty wedding to the prince's dread of seeing accomplished an ancient prophecy, which was said to have pronounced that the castle and lordship of Otranto should pass from the present family whenever the real owner should be grown too large to inhabit it. It was difficult to make any sense of this prophecy, and still less easy to conceive what it had to do with the marriage in question. Yet these mysteries or contradictions did not make the populace adhere the less to their opinion. Young Conrad's birthday was fixed for his espousals. The company was assembled in the chapel of the castle, and everything was ready for beginning the divine office when Conrad himself was missing. Manfred, impatient of the least delay, and who had not observed his son retire, dispatched one of his attendants to summon the young prince. The servant, who had not stayed long enough to have crossed the court to Conrad's apartment, came running back breathless, in a frantic manner, his eyes staring and foaming at the mouth. He said nothing, but pointed to the court. The company were struck with terror and amazement. The Princess Hippolyta, without knowing what was the matter, but anxious for her son, swooned away. Manfred, less apprehensive than enraged at the procrastination of the nuptials, and at the folly of his domestic, asked imperiously what was the matter. The fellow made no answer, but continued pointing towards the courtyard. And then, at last, after repeated questions put to him, cried out, "Oh, the helmet! The helmet!" In the meantime, some of the company had run into the court, from whence was heard a confused noise of shrieks, horror, and surprise. Manfred, who began to be alarmed at not seeing his son, went himself to get information of what occasioned this strange confusion. Matilda remained, endeavoring to assist her mother, and Isabella stayed for the same purpose, and to avoid showing any impatience for the bridegroom, for whom, in truth, she had conceived little affection. The first thing that struck Manfred's eyes was a group of his servants endeavoring to raise something that appeared to him a mountain of sable plumes. He gazed without believing his sight. "What are you doing?" cried Manfred wrathfully. "Where's my son?" A volley of voices cried, "Oh, my lord, the prince, the prince, the helmet, the helmet!" Shocked with these lamentable sounds, and dreading he knew not what, he advanced hastily. But what a sight for a father's eyes! He beheld his child dashed to pieces, and almost buried under an enormous helmet, 100 times more large than any casque ever made for a human being, and shaded with a proportionable quantity of black feathers. The horror of the spectacle, the ignorance of all around how this misfortune had happened, and above all the tremendous phenomenon before him, took away the prince's speech. Yet his silence lasted longer than even grief could occasion. He fixed his eyes on what he wished in vain to believe a vision, and seemed less attentive to his loss than buried in meditation on the stupendous object that had occasioned it. He touched, he examined the fatal casque. Nor could even the bleeding, mangled remains of the young prince divert the eyes of Manfred from the portent before him. All who had known his partial fondness for young Conrad were as much surprised at their prince's insensibility as thunderstruck at the miracle of the helmet. They conveyed the disfigured corpse into the hall without receiving the least direction from Manfred, as little as he was attentive to the ladies who remained in the chapel. On the contrary, without mentioning the unhappy princesses, his wife and daughter, the first sounds that dropped from Manfred's lips were, "Take care of the Lady Isabella." So that's enough to give you a taste, I think. You've got a curse, right? And you've got the young innocent woman Matilda, and you've got the that's become a bit of a trope too. I think that you've got the invalided son who's being pushed to marry when he shouldn't be because he's invalided, and the father who's full of pride and making bad decisions and ignoring curses and prophecies and that kind of thing. So of course the rest of the book follows Matilda because she's got to have some adventures from here, and it is so much fun. It's I think of all the different genres that you could read, like the oldest version of and a more recent version of, Gothic romance has stayed the same. Like, even when it's changed to a contemporary setting, there's still this high drama and the danger of secrets. The danger of secrets, I think, is the biggest theme in them, and part of why I love them. It's part of why I'm trying to write one myself right now, which hopefully I'll be able to finish and get out to readers soon. Watch for it. The Architect and the Heir is its working title, although, who knows what the title will be by the time it's available to read. So thanks for visiting with me tonight, and I hope you'll check out The Castle of Otranto. It's well worth the read.